Well, I'm really excited to introduce a great friend of mine and a new Rotary member. We're happy to have you. He's going to be a great addition to the club. Ben is a social entrepreneur committed to creating opportunities for all people to reach their full potential. Ben believes the power of passionate leadership, good systems, and a data-driven approach can translate into real impact in our community, and I agree with him. He is currently the chief storyteller for a tech startup called Mobile Serve that is focused on building a culture of service in organizations and communities by tracking and communicating social good. He also moonlights as the project director of the Greater Louisville Project, a donor-funded think tank that is dedicated to using data to catalyze social change. Ben is a Louisville native. He's worked with the World Bank, the International Finance Corporation, the Boston Consulting Group, and the YMCA. He holds a BA in International Affairs from George Washington University, a Master's in Public Administration from the Harvard Kennedy School, and an MBA from the Harvard Business School. Ben is a fearless change maker in our community. He has boundless energy. He is crazy smart and super fun. So you all are going to really enjoy today. I'm looking forward to it. But one of the things I really look forward to is not just what Ben is doing today, but what he's going to do for decades to come in our community and in this world. So with that, welcome, Ben.
Wow. Thank you, Kristen. I don't know how in the world you follow an introduction like that, so I'm going to do my very best to live up to those words. So when President Alice, who is sadly sick today, asked me to speak about storytelling for this session, she told me that two really important things were driving her to ask me to be here. One is that we were going to have the unsung heroes, and because I had worked with teenagers with the YMCA for such a long time, I probably would not be terrified, unlike many of the speakers that we have had. And two, this is traditionally the least well-attended Rotary session of the entire year. So please come to this one, she said to me. So what I want to talk about is the power of story, and I want to talk about why doing good isn't good enough. So I have spoken to probably 20 Rotary clubs across the state of Kentucky in my role as the CEO of the Kentucky Y. So the Kentucky YMCA is a separately chartered Y that focuses entirely on engaging student voices and empowering those voices to do good in the world. And when I first started talking with Rotary clubs, I got so excited about the four-way test. And what I was excited about was I think this is such a fabulous way to frame our individual actions. But as I talked more and more with different Rotary groups, and I came to understand how few people in our communities, here and across the state, knew what Rotary did. They knew the how, the sort of mechanics of the you get together with lunch with all of these people and it's great networking. But the why didn't seem to translate. And it certainly didn't seem to translate to the students that we worked with who maybe their parents somewhere did Rotary, but what is it about and why should I be a part of it? And they should be. These were exactly the students that we should be engaging. They are people who have been inspired to do something much like these people and are going out and doing things already. They are the perfect Rotarians. So I would add to the four-way test maybe a little bit of extra credit, which is the fifth question. Is what you are doing building a culture of service? Because I think people who do good tend to say, well, I don't do good for the recognition, right? I do good to do good. But I would argue that at this point in time, especially in this community, that's not good enough. We can't just be doing good things. We have to be talking about those good things that we are doing. We have to be working to inspire other people to join us. So I grew up here. This is a picture of me in high school, awkwardly zit covered. It does, however, not have the chin strap beard that I thought was so fashionable when I was 15 years old. I grew up here and was inspired by the Kentucky YMCA's programs. Interestingly, particularly inspired by a program that is kicking off in the other Galthouse Tower today, which is our Model United Nations program, in which young people spend 3 days walking in the shoes of someone from another country. And when I grew up, I went to college, went overseas for a while, came back to this country, and one of my friends said to me, hey, you know, remember those people who were so powerful in our lives at the Y? You know, you can be one of those people now. You could come back and volunteer. And that thought had never crossed my mind, that I could be one of those volunteers. So I came back and I volunteered at program after program. This is me dressed up like a Ninja Turtle, for those of you who can't see in the back. Because part of the value of the program is saying, if you put yourself out there in an awkward and ridiculous way, you're building the skills to put yourself out there for the things that really matter. And so I came back as a volunteer, and then moved to DC, met my wife singing karaoke, followed her to a couple of jobs, and then on a train from a business client that I had in New York to our one-bedroom, no-car apartment in downtown DC, I ran into the former executive director. And I said, Mike, what are you doing? And he said, I'm about to retire. And I said, who's going to take your job? He said, I don't know, we're going to do a national search. And I said, I'm national. And then I had this conversation with my wife, honey, what would you think about moving to Kentucky? To which she responded, I've never thought about Kentucky. But 6 months later, here we were, and I became the CEO of that organization. It's actually my great pleasure that as an aspiring potential Rotarian we have in the audience today, my successor in that job, Ms. Beth Malcolm. So if you guys could give her a Rotary welcome, a round of applause. So working with young people to inspire their voices and to really help them to express the things that they were already doing in order to leverage their networks has translated for me into two things. Kristen mentioned the Greater Louisville Project. She didn't mention that she was the director of the Greater Louisville Project before me, and then when I met her in her previous role, I said, that sounds like the coolest job ever. How does one get it? And then when she left, she was like, hey, you could maybe have this. And I also run this tech company called MobileServe, and MobileServe is sort of like Fitbit for social good. How many of you all are Fitbit users or have used Fitbits? Like a couple? Fitbit works because it takes this aspiration that one has to be healthier, to be more active, and it helps to make it a game. But it also helps to make it social. My father-in-law, who is a portly gentleman who works in a sewage treatment plant in Hartford, Connecticut, used to take the cart around the sewage plant where he worked. And we bought him a Fitbit, and almost immediately he stopped taking the cart and started sending us taunting text messages because he had waddled 15,000 steps around the sewage plant. And every day he would say, look what I did, right? He would humble brag, and he loved that opportunity to humble brag about the things that he was doing. Well, I would argue that what we need right now is more people humble bragging, right? So I'd also talk a little bit with public relations firms and HR firms about the engagement, and about their engagement and how they tell their stories. It used to be, essentially, you would have a set of programs that you did, and the people who participated in those programs or bought your products, Rotarians, would talk a little bit about what they were doing. If they did a really good job, they would be picked up by some kind of media, and that helped to build their brand. And then that would lead to more volunteers, donors, participants, Rotarians. It was a relatively simple cycle. Works for Rotary, works for companies. The problem is, that's not how it works anymore, right? That idea of you do good work and all of a sudden people will know about you is no longer applicable. Now, the values that you express and the programs that you do and the brand that you have are all deeply interconnected, and that's only part of it because the people that work for you and participate for you are now connected not only to the traditional media, but to all kinds of social media sideways. And by the way, people are very rarely engaging with media directly any longer, particularly millennials and the generation coming after them, right? For most of them, the social media is the primary filter through which they access any kind of media or messaging. And so if you want your message to connect to them, which we do because we need them, right? We need younger, vibrant, more exciting and excited people to be connected to the work that we are doing in the community. And the barrier to that is not, I don't know what to do. Because that's what everyone thinks, right? They're like, oh, if only I knew where to volunteer, I would go do it. Right? That's the barrier everyone has in their head. But as it turns out, there is this magical thing called the Googles. And if you cared enough to wonder where you could volunteer, you could put into the Googles volunteering and animals. And up will pop up, I will put a little plug in here for Metro United Way, where my wife works, a volunteer portal run by this fantastic nonprofit. And a for-profit volunteer portal called Volunteer Match that will tell you where you can go volunteer. That's not the problem. The problem is that people so rarely see themselves as actually going and doing this. And that's why I think what you all are doing is so important, because you are the peer leaders that drive this kind of activity. I came back to volunteer at the Y, not because I all of a sudden remembered that the Y was there. I always knew it was there, but because one of my friends said to me, come with me. And that's where the power, I think, of Rotary really is. Right? So Rotary is not the only organization struggling with this kind of thing. Starbucks is struggling with this. We were out there a month ago pitching them on our company, and they were like, we love this tech works, but we need to figure out how to be engaging not just our employees, but also our customers, and also all these other people who are connected to us. When Starbucks says, I'm going to hire 10,000 veterans, there are a lot of people who care about that who will never buy a Starbucks coffee. And when they say, I'm going to hire 10,000 refugees, there are a lot of people who care about that who have never had a double macchiato. Right? With the Greater Louisville Project, we came out with a report late last year that identified 1 in 7 Louisvillians live in a neighborhood of concentrated poverty. That's a shocking statistic. What's interesting, wow. What was interesting about it also is that we came to understand that poverty is not just a matter of income. It's a matter of these set of interconnected things. It is income as part of it, but it is also education. Because education by itself provides security and flexibility and paths out of poverty that even if you have a good income right now, this is an important component. Right? And that is deeply interconnected with health. If you have a good job and you are reasonably well educated and you have a child who suffers from chronic asthma, you are at much higher risk of losing that job because you have to take that child to the hospital. And unemployment in and of itself, regardless of income or having your needs met, is its own driver. And then living in a neighborhood of concentrated poverty by itself. So we have this message. But the message itself doesn't matter if it doesn't translate into action. The way that we translated this message into action was by creating a vision. Hey, out of our 17 peer cities, 15 of them are doing a better job at this than we are, which means that it's possible for us. But what does that mean? What is the call to action? It means we need you to get engaged in exactly the sort of activities that Cheryl is organizing for Rotary. Right? It is helping to improve the educational experience of students in our community. It is helping to do mentoring. It is helping to support the Smoketown Family Wellness Center, where so many people who are at risk will receive health care. But they need your help to do it. And this has implications for us as a community that are far beyond the individual impact. If we could take the 4 poorest neighborhoods in our community and help the 55,000 people who live there, just 55,000, have the same outcomes as are normal and average in our community right now, we would create $386 million in additional economic activity. We would have 5,200 kids not growing up in poverty. We would have an additional 7,000 bachelor's degrees, particularly concentrated in the communities where those can be the most transformative. 6,000 additional jobs, and we actually have to change this stat, because when we say 400,000 additional life years from just having these communities have the same economic and educational outcomes as is average in our city. 400,000 additional life years people can't process. So we have to say 8 years of life for a resident. Right, so what does all that mean? Here's the thing. We're already doing the work. When you look at the partnerships that Rotary has with Western and with Iroquois, you are already there doing transformative things. As we in our community talk about this idea of creating a promise scholarship in which we say every kid in this community we will help to go to college, people are like, that's amazing. Like, yeah, and we're already doing it on this scale. And almost nobody that I talked to about it knew that Rotary was doing that. Almost nobody. Unless you were in this room. But you are. And that's the thing that I think we need to get our heads around. This idea of humbly serving, quietly making the world a better place isn't enough anymore. Right? Why don't more people know about it? They don't know about it because we're not talking about it. So that's my challenge for you all. We need to find the right ways from leaving here, leaving this room, to be saying, hey, where were you when you go back to work or to wherever you are going from here? Not, oh, I was at Rotary. But I went to connect with a group of people that give me energy and inspiration. And people will say, well, what is that? Well, the what almost doesn't matter as much as the why. Right? I am here because I want to hear about the most exciting things happening in our community. I want to know how I can give back. I have made that commitment. That's what it means to take that, to make that pledge, to take that test every week. I want to be a part of that, and that what we need to do is telling that story. And there's huge value to be created there. Last year, 60 million Americans volunteered. That's $184 billion in economic activity created by volunteerism. More than 100 million households in the U.S. gave money to a cause that they cared about. And this is the thing, this is even more impactful when you're talking about millennials, who now represent 50% of the economy. So just wrestle with that in your head a little bit. When we talk about, oh, you know, those millennials, they don't work, and they, you know, they're all the stuff that we say all the time, right? I can't understand their work ethic, they're so entitled, blah, 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 blah. They're 50% of the economy now. So they're not to be dismissed, and the cares that they have about engaging with their values impact how they spend their money. 70% volunteered, 84% get most of their news from social media, and 60% are more likely to spend more money to be associated with a brand that they care about, that shares their social values. Smoke on that. That's pretty interesting. All right, so why is it so hard? This is an eye test for those of you at the back. This is vision. And I'm happy to send these out, but this is the McKinsey & Company model for social change. And this is what I'm going to close with. McKinsey says for any organization to be successful at change, they have to have a clear vision of what they're trying to accomplish. We have that clear vision. They have to have the skills to execute on that vision. I'd argue that we're getting there. But we need to work about how we tell stories. That is a skill. And then they need to have some sort of incentive, some kind of recognition, some kind of thing. Well, Rotary is really good at that. We talk every week about an outstanding Rotarian. We have these awards programs, and we can get better. You need to have the resources to do it. That's actually easier than it's ever been. Social media makes it possible for us to storytell in ways and to people who we've never been able to do before. And then we need to have a plan about how we do this. I would argue that Cheryl and Teresa and John and others have part of a plan. They're going to need your help to develop the rest of it. So one of my favorite social organizers is a guy named Marshall Gans. And he says, movements have narratives. They tell stories because they're not just about rearranging economics or politics. They're not just about expressing what is good. They're about changing meaning. They're not just about redistributing goods. They are about defining what is good. So that's the ask that I would have for you all today. When somebody asks you, where are you going? Or what are you doing? Or where were you? Don't say, oh, I went to Rotary. It was great. Man, that beef was phenomenal. Say, I went to this place looking for inspiration, and I came back with it. right? And you should come with me. Not because we need more members, although that would be great, but because we need more people who are active. And when you are doing good and serving and creating, whether that's under the Rotary umbrella or all of the other places that you do good, don't be hiding that under a bushel. Be elevating that as the inspiration that it should be to a community that needs you to be talking about it. Doing good is not good enough anymore. Thank you all. Yeah, we have time for some questions and answers. Because President Alice isn't here to tell the ground rules, I think the ground rules are they have to actually be a question, they have to be told by a Rotarian, and they shouldn't be super offensive or hard. All right, sounds good.
You're right about the rules.
Oh, good.
My name is Larry Sloan, and I'm a Rotarian. And my question is this. How do you go about on social media presenting things that you've seen or done that are doing good without seeming like you're boasting or bragging? So, you know, there is a problem with that. People go on a trip, a mission trip somewhere, and they start posting pictures of these poor little children, and they say, here I am in Africa, and blah, blah, blah. So how do you go about wording that or framing that?
So I think there's two separate pieces to that question. Part A is, how do I humble brag without sounding like a jerk?
Yes.
So that piece is, Rotary made me do it, right? Or my company made me do it, or this cause. I'm here because if you talk about the why, because I believe so deeply in the mission of Boys and Girls Clubs, who are transforming the lives of these kids, right? That is totally acceptable in the social realm. It's not about you. Now, that's a different thing that I'm going to take a picture of this kid and like throw that out there like, hey, look, poor kid, right? That's bad. But hey, here is us supporting this mission. The master of this in the universe, and I'm sorry he's not here today, is Steve Tarver, the CEO of the Louisville Y. And he will say to every single one of his employees, tell me why you are doing what you're doing. And drill down and drill down and drill down until every person, he does this in every single employee orientation with every person. The towel guy who hands you a towel when you walk in the door of the downtown Y isn't doing this because he cares about the towel. It's because he wants you to feel welcome and part of a community that is about making the world a better place. Right?
Thank you.
Hey Ben, Tom Williams. Quick question on, I understand Mobile Serve is a B Corp. Could you speak to what a B Corp is and what kind of benefit that could have?
B Corps are a fascinating form of business that just became legal in Kentucky as of Monday. So a B Corps is a kind of company that says doing good in the world is a value that we hold in which we are going to inform our investors that sometimes we're going to choose to make the world a better place, even if that costs money. We are a B Corp, and what that means for us is that sometimes we're not going to maximize the value to our investors because it's more important for us as an identity, as a mission, to do something else. Is that our time? Is that our time clap? No, all right.
One more quick question. Cynthia Napek. And we got a little snip of Mobile Serve, but will you also tell them a little bit about the website that is the Greater Louisville Project so that they know where to get great information?
Yeah, and it's about to get better. So the Greater Louisville Project does community-level data, and almost anything you want to know about how our community is doing in terms of competitiveness in education, jobs, arts, environment, we have statistics about that as it compares to our peer cities. So it's greaterlouisvilleproject.org. And if you want to nerd out, like really nerd out, we've got all the underlying data and how these are interconnected. We're always happy to do that with you.
Hi, Ken Grossman, Executive Image Custom Clothiers. I just have to ask this question.
Uh-oh.
Why are you wearing a T-shirt underneath the coat? What's the deal? There's got to be
because the T-shirt
significance.
says, do good.
I love it. I love it.
The custom, and actually, anyone who saw me walking in knew that I actually had a grown-up shirt on earlier, and I took off my grown-up shirt just for you. So thank you for asking that. All right, I'm very conscious of the time, so thank you all so much for having me, and thank you for the work that you do as Rotarians.